which you can measure on meters like this, the EMF, is gone. This meter doesn't read it anymore. Once that photon disappears, all that energy of the photon goes into another object. When I got this download, it was the EMF, that's photons traveling light speed carrying energy. When they smash into something like a subatomic particle like an electron, the electron absorbs the photon. The EMF, which you can measure on meters like this, the EMF is gone. This meter doesn't read it anymore. Once that photon disappears, all that energy of the photon goes into another object. Now it becomes a different form of energy. It can turn into heat. It can turn into other things, some of which is produced we call subatomic chaos. That's a term we've coined to explain like what's going on. So let's just call it a little shaking and vibrating of tiny molecules that spreads really well when molecules are close together, especially through metal. And if you are around that little tiny shaking and vibrating we call subatomic chaos, that's the stuff that the EMF at any frequency turns into once it smashes into something. Then it has effects on you. And I ran across studies like Dr. Martin Paul's, who talked about calcium channels being affected by these things. So I said, great. So over the years, we tested it all out, even on human cells, and how calcium channels are being affected, which is, according to him, is like the root cause of how everything else snowballs as effects in you. Not only did that study produce amazing results with different human cells in petri dishes being exposed to a router nearby and having huge calcium fluctuations, which means those calcium channels in the cells were absolutely being affected like the way that all the studies said prior. But when our products were introduced, they went back to baseline. They went back to as if the router was not even there at all. And without getting into all the studies and all the information about our products, that was an enormous breakthrough. If anybody that studies this stuff, because they could say, like, everybody quotes Dr. Martin Paul and the calcium channel thing as being such a major, like, building block about what happens in your cell that affects your cell that can snowball into other effects. And then it seems like the world wants to ignore what we're doing. Not our clients, of course, but the other companies are just still like plugging away at their, negative ions and this and that. And I can explain why all those things either don't do anything or help a little bit, because some of them affect the subatomic chaos a little. But our products were created around what I was shown, and our products are addressing not the EMF, but we're addressing that subatomic chaos, okay, that second domino that happens on EMFs. And when we do it, we're getting results like nobody's business. Now, let's fast forward to 6 months or so ago. All these clients we heard from that said, oh my gosh, I use your products, and I had all these testimonials like Dr. Carey can tell you. Were calling us, all the canary in the coal mines out there, like more than 6 months ago, were calling and saying, I'm not feeling so good as I used to. Like something happened. I used your products 2 years ago. This was the worst thing that has ever come to planet Earth, as far as EMFs go, and probably other things. This single-handed EMF, this new high-speed fiber optics, is worse than probably all of the other EMFs that cell phones, cell towers, Starlink, which was majorly affecting us in the last 4 or 5 years, and is now Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, power lines, SCADA poles, all the things added up. This new fiber optic in your neighborhood, even if you don't have a service, but it's in your neighborhood, will crush things, will affect your environment, will destroy the house and the environment worse than all the others combined. I'm thinking to myself, how many billions of dollars were spent on this? And where's the return on investment? Because I'm a scientist, but I'm a business person too. I got a master's in business too. So why would you spend all this money so fast, faster than anything I've seen, faster than 5G came out, faster than anything I've ever seen? Why is it there so fast? Why do we need 100 people on the internet in every house? That's a question you can answer. That's a really crazy thing.
The Internet of Bodies. We're the Internet of Bodies to gather our data and to influence us and to also do a culling.
Just saying, that's weird. Okay, just looking at it from a businessman standpoint, I want somebody in that business panel at all these different carriers. They all had to do it, all of them. Yep. You can look on the street and see all the different carriers that are having fiber optic. There may be one in your neighborhood, 3, 5, like they're just going up like hotcakes. And why? Why all this money was spent for all of this to be here? I don't know. What do you think's going to those data centers? You think they're using the slow, cables, or are they going to use this new high-speed fiber optics galore? So I can't even imagine living next to one.
Yeah.
I bet you our products are going to crush it. You might need more. You might need, just like being next to a cell tower or something, you might need more, but I bet you our products are going to crush those things like it's nobody's business, especially the fiber part, which is probably single-handedly by far the worst part of those. So I can't wait to test one. So if you know somebody near one of those, connect them to me, because I'd like a test market on it. Because the sunshine is unpolarized. And the difference between man-made radiation and nature's radiation is pretty much polarization. And polarization means that when photons are flying at you and they hit you and they hit the objects around you, because it's not just you, it's the floor next to you, it's the seats you're sitting in, it's really the metal things, because all of this conducts well through the metal. But when it hits these things, let's say one photon hits and it creates a force in that direction, let's call it 5, doesn't matter what the force is. 5, right? Another photon hits, because there's so many hitting at the same time, because it's the sun. Another one creates 5 in that direction. Those two forces cancel each other out, right? So when it's unpolarized, all of these forces are happening, but they all cancel each other out. So the net is pretty close to 0. So when nature's radiation,
What exactly is the chip made out of?
Proprietary, right? So
Is that right?
We have a video on our website. There are ways that we test, but we have natural materials. So to be honest with you, one of our materials, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 materials and different versions of those for different products for different reasons. But one of the materials, I have to go and we're due for that soon, so I'm going to have to go out there. About 6%, 8% of all the material that I'm going to go look for has properties that help. But about 1% of that has really strong properties I can use in products. So I'm going to be going all over quarries. Like last time I looked, there's every quarry in Charleston where I live, nothing. Then I went out and I had to keep going out and out. And then I found one about 4 or 5 hours away. And of this football field of, I don't even know how tall, like 3 stories tall football field amount of this material they had. One section in the back had a whole mess of it, so we got a whole bunch of bags, and we use those in products, and now I'm getting close to the time where I got to go back out and do it. But if you look at our website, there's 3 tests we do for this one particular material. I show you a meter. I don't tell you what the meter's testing because we had it special made, but you can see me putting different rocks and crystals and different things in here, and it gives you readings, and that's just one of the things that we use to test our materials. I don't tell you what our secrets are, obviously, for obvious reasons. We have patents pending. I won't finish because then it's public, and China can just steal your stuff in 2 seconds, so it's going to remain that way. But I'll tell you that what our products are trying to do is you're taking subatomic chaos as a shaking and vibrating of little tiny vibrations, okay? Mm-hmm. And if you have forces, they're jumping in all different directions, okay? And you take, let's say it's a magnetic force. EMFs have a magnetic component and an electrical force. So the photon's traveling this way, and perpendicular to that has an electrical force and a magnetic force. They oscillate, whatever frequency they oscillate is what you call it, like electric frequency or Wi-Fi or X-ray or nuclear power or whatever, right? So that's 60 waves a second or billions or many, many trillions is what, the ionic radiation like X-rays and whatnot. So, but they're all photons traveling light speed. Now, if you have 4 magnetic forces traveling in different directions, and then you put a strong magnet down that wants to align things up, what you've done is you've organized or harmonized that area. So that area is going to now receive the stronger message of the magnet and probably ignore that little tiny message of this shaking and vibrating force. That's not what we're doing, but it's a similar analogy as how we're addressing that subatomic chaos in a way.
Have you addressed elite shungite?
So there's shungite. There's all kinds of materials you can put in resin, make pyramids out of, and it strengthens whatever's in there. But there's no one material that has all the properties that we need. There is none. Okay. The one that I get like 1 or 2% is strong enough to use in products. And so I think out there's other crystals and rock stores that are known for like EMF protection. You've probably heard of like I can't even think of them off the top of my head. I can't
Organite.
even think of, what's that?
Organite.
Well, orgonite, I believe, is just whatever you put in resin.
Yeah.
Shungite's one of the materials. So orgonite just means you're putting something in resin, and when it's in resin, it strengthens like the properties of that thing. But anyway, there's different materials out there. None of them work all the time on EMFs. I know because I know what I'm talking about. And I think the way that they got their name for being some kind of EMF protection thing was because somebody found a bunch of material, and that particular material was working, and they shared it with a bunch of people that had testimonials that said this stuff works. So it got this reputation that this material was working, when it's really that material in that area and that mountain worked. But if you get it from all over the world, like probably a small percent works. And that's what I found across the board. I could take red jasper, I could take quartz, I could take all these different things. And there's usually a small percentage of all these different crystals has this certain property that we test for. Mm-hmm. So I've done I went there a long time ago, like more than 15 years ago, trying to say like what materials are going to work. And so I haven't found one of those that always works,
Did you ever associate this with the ephod, the breastplate of Aaron?
And I had the privilege of talking with Steve Olson just a couple of days ago. I can't even remember. It's been crazy busy. And something that he had mentioned on the phone with me, because he's actually a part of this whole fiber optics, not, it's just kind of one of those jobs that you have. But the federal government is actually paying for all this fiber to go into the ground and up, in the air. And you kind of know if the government's paying for stuff, it might be something going on about that. So just something to think about.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And then you said you would tell us about the technology of the fiber optics. If you have some time.
Yeah, so when you look at the fiber optics, and I don't have time to get into all this really specifics of it, but there's multiple things that fiber is using. So take a step back real quick. The sun has a very high frequency coming down on us, way higher than our fiber and all that, and our there's infrared in fiber, but it's way high. The sun's frequencies are way higher than 5G and all the stuff people have been worried about for a while. So why aren't we worried about the sunshine? Walk outside. Oh my gosh, it's the same level as a good cell phone on a cell phone call, and it's way higher frequency. So why are we worried about walking out in the sunshine? Because the sunshine is unpolarized. And the difference between man-made radiation and nature's radiation is pretty much polarization. And polarization means that when photons are flying at you and they hit you and they hit the objects around you, because it's not just you, it's the floor next to you, it's the seats you're sitting in, it's really the metal things, because all of this conducts well through the metal. But when it hits these things, let's say one photon hits and it creates a force in that direction, let's call it 5, doesn't matter what the force is. 5, right? Another photon hits, because there's so many hitting at the same time because it's the sun. Another one creates 5 in that direction. Those two forces cancel each other out, right? So when it's unpolarized, all of these forces are happening, but they all cancel each other out. So the net is pretty close to 0. So when nature's radiation is absorbing into an object, the net force ends up being pretty much 0. Man makes radiation polarized. When you make electricity, you're shaking or spinning a magnet. And when the EMFs are coming off of that, people are freaking out about, rightfully so, is like 100 billion. And that just happened pretty close to 0. So when nature's radiation is absorbing into an object, the net force ends up being pretty much 0. Man makes radiation polarized. When you make electricity, you're shaking or spinning a magnet. And when the EMFs are coming off of that, they're all in a pattern, okay, on a plane. So now when they're hitting, they're making forces go that way, then that way, then that way, then that way, then that way. So it's shaking stuff on a subatomic level when those polarizing EMFs are hitting things. That's where we're having our issues. The reason fiber is so crazy bad, first of all, the frequency is infrared. So the frequency is either 192 trillion waves a second. And I said the highest of all the 5G stuff that people are freaking out about, rightfully so, is like 100 billion. And that just happened with Starlink's ground stations, which is psychotically high, which is 20 times higher than your router. But 40,000 times higher than your router is fiber optic frequency, or 80,000 times higher than that, because sometimes it goes almost to 400 trillion waves a second. So the frequency in fiber is immense. The intensity is not. So it's not about intensity. It's about that. It's about how polarizing something is. Now, you take that many waves a second, which is just blows everything else that I've seen that we're using EMF wise. Now, they don't think that the technology can get out the cable. People don't think so because they don't understand EMFs. The EMF stays in the cable. Almost none of the EMF comes out of the cable. So then why is it a problem? And all the experts, all the EMF experts and all the scientists who created this stuff, including my uncle, God love him, genius IQ, amazing. Can't even tell you what he's working on because it's top secret all the time. They just assume, great, problem solved. It stays in there and it's not going to bother anybody. What I know about the radiation is they'll tell you that every kilometer there's so much loss of energy. Okay, loss of energy. Does energy disappear? Everybody knows common physics, right? Energy doesn't disappear, it changes forms. So when they say, oh, there's loss of energy, they call it attenuation, right? So when there's attenuation, that means not as much of the signal from where it started from got to the other side where it's being received. Well, where'd that energy go? They ignore it. They ignore it. It's not a thing. It's not a question. They don't study it. They don't figure it out. They don't know. They don't care about it. They just go, it turns to heat, a couple other things, we're good. Okay, so that turns to a shaking and vibrating we call subatomic chaos, that loss of energy in the cable. That loss of energy in the cable at astronomical frequencies that are astronomically polarized, which I didn't get into, which it wasn't before, now travel out of that cable, and when they find something metal, that subatomic chaos finds something metal, it travels really well through the metal. That's metal electric wires, like that went to my house, because they were all underground. That's your internet cable, that's your old phone cable, that's any of that stuff. Finds that metal, travels along right into your house. So you don't have the fiber optic, but because it's down the road or down the street or at the end of your driveway, it's finding the metal in the cables and it's traveling into your house almost like you have it. So that's what makes it so bad. Now the polarizing part is the worst part. So not only is it up to 80,000 times the frequency of your router and your phone and laptop and all the stuff in your house, but it's polarizing like nothing's ever been before that I've seen. So the scientists are brilliant to discover all these ways to manipulate these waves into patterns, which is the bad part. Patterns is where the enemy is. Patterns that get polarizing, that are shaking and vibrating and messing with all the subatomic particles in a way. That's what makes it bad. And there's called QAM, there's multiplexing, there's all these different things, and it's too hard to explain and get into the weeds of that. But it's like all of these patterns. It's like a tic-tac-toe. It's like a really complex tic-tac-toe board every time they're firing these waves, and all the different rearrangement of tic-tac-toes can give a different message. What that all means is there's all these many times more ones and zeros, or X's and O's, or however you want to think of it, ones and zeros like a computer per second that comes through compared to the old fiber or anything else that's really being used out there, even Starlink or any of that stuff. So it's an immense, really cool technology-wise amount of information. But the old fiber was basically unpolarized. They didn't purposely polarize it, and when they fired these things in these mirror cables they travel through, they kind of spun around randomly. And when they spun around randomly and that chaos came out, it came out in all random directions, which is like the sun being unpolarized. But now it's purposely polarizing, and it's coming out insane quantity of polarizations per second.
It's like
and
a laser.
When that hits us, it's freaking out. It must be freaking out our calcium channels to no end.
Thank you for the explanation. And then just want to reiterate what Kathy said. Steve Olson texted, he's a telephone engineer involved in the placement of fiber optic cable. The telephone companies are not putting out the money for the upgrades. There's a ton of federal grant money to be used in the rural areas. And so, you know, it's definitely a worldwide effort here. So it's just good to know. A lot of people are confused. They're like, is our administration really helping us out playing 5D chess? And it looks bad, but really it's really good. Well, I mean, why is that happening when they know that it's hurting us? So that's more to lean on God and the body of Christ than it is to lead on any man in any position or office, right?